I call to order this Board of Education meeting for June 26th, 2018. Will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas tardes. Si hay alguien en el público que necesite los aparatos para interpretación al español, los tenemos disponibles por estas puertas dobles. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Headset for the hearing impaired are also available. Please indicate if you need a headset. And now we'll make an announcement from our closed session. Action was taken on 2 items. Item B2, a motion was made to accept the resignation agreement of a district employee. Motion made by Ms. Parker, second by Member Paredes Iora, and the vote was unanimous. And when I say unanimous, because Dr. Jacqueline Reed is absent today, the unanimous is 4 members tonight. The second item, B5, motion to approve appointment of Lauren Berlin, principal of La Cuesta Alta Vista High School. The motion was made by Ms. Parker, second by Paredes Iora, and the vote was unanimous. Thank you. Next, we'll have the superintendent's report.
So there's a picture that I would ask Mr. Rouse to put up on the screen. And this is a picture of Miss Joanne Keynes. And, you know, we had a board meeting after promotions, but it was so fresh after that week. And this is an image I will remember forever. I mean, that's her space. That's her home. And what a tremendous person and leader. We have not realized the loss yet. I think it's when we go back this fall and we miss her laugh, her presence, her questions, her sarcasm, all the things that made Miss Keynes unique. What a lady. So I would just ask for a moment of silence in honor and respect of Miss Joanne Keynes. And all of the settings in which we've started, I guess, grieving and remembering Joanne. Wow, so many funny stories and so many great memories and so many imperfections in this woman, but you could not question her conviction about students, about outcomes for kids. And literally, she has changed the lives of thousands of kids. Just thousands, and both at Adams and at La Cumbre. I mean, collectively, she was a principal with us for probably 22 years, something like that, long time. So many of our team has learned how to be a principal under her. So she's missed tremendously. And I think in the fall when we come back, I know some of the board would like to have conversations about how do we remember Joanne Keynes at the school. And so we look forward to those future conversations. So rest in peace, Joanne. You're a great lady.
Thank you. Are there any board comments or correspondence? Ms. Katz?
Yeah, I'd just like to report that our wonderful summer meal program is up and running. I've had the pleasure of going to a couple of the sites. So the district is providing food for over half of the 50 places where in the county any child can get a free meal. And it's just such a wonderful service, and the food is delicious. And one of the best parts about it is that a lot of parents eat with their children for $4, which is the best deal in town, a nutritious, often organic, local food. So we're at Franklin this morning and Oak Park and all these wonderful places where our community really comes together. So it's just another wonderful thing that we do to help kids who in the summer, it's when hunger spikes. It's when they're not associated with the district food that they get every day. And so it's really important that they know that that food is still available for them. So thanks.
Yes, Ms. Parker.
And I just want to report that I was at the Santa Barbara County School Boards Association meeting the week after all of our promotion ceremonies. And their featured speaker was 2 members of the admin team at the Scholarship Foundation of Santa Barbara. And it felt particularly timely because Joanne Keynes' mother was one of the founders of that Scholarship Foundation. And I just want to give them a shout out for the millions of dollars that they served, that they give to our students throughout the county, and the way their vision for the future. And the thing that they wanted to focus on was moving from just getting kids to college to getting kids through college. And so they've been changing some of their strategies around that. And it's really exciting for the future.
Thank you. Next, we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
We do. I would like to call to the podium Mr. Kenneth Locke, followed by Ike Jenkins. Thanks.
My name is Kenneth Locke, here once again. I went before the Arts Commission in town, and I kind of have a job to turn the light on interdisciplinary education. And it's actually time now, like I'm figuring that for the 21st century, that's where we're going. We need to go. And for the Arts Commission, I pushed that whole idea, and then I'll be going before Parks and Rec and stuff, and pushing it tomorrow. But the whole idea of how this is like essential now is just based on art history, the evolution of our consciousness, awareness of the fine art form of painting, and the idea that recognize the works of like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko, and then there was, I can go through a list like the New York School of Artists going all the way back to Kandinsky and Bauhaus and the Futurists, and now, who I represent is, who I claim to be, is the last of the avant-garde abstract painters of the 20th century. And the idea now, the knowledge that I'm going to be bringing to the table is in relation to how painting represents itself as a spiritual or metaphysical practice. And to really understand Jackson Pollock's work, we can now recognize that, and that when we do have that understanding, then we can understand painting, music, and dance is interdisciplinary in relation to them all being, say, spiritual and metaphysical practices. And the idea now the students should, when it comes to, say, a fine arts program, students should not specialize themselves. It's really important for their best interest and a community's best interest that they do become interdisciplinary and actually reach their full potential when it comes to being an artist. And then also when it comes to all this, also through athletics, I was able to take the athletic discipline of tennis and understand it as a mind-body exercise, also like a holistic health practice, spiritual practice, where you'll develop your whole body. So it's a whole new paradigm for tennis, and it's a whole new paradigm for
30 seconds,
education please. Now. So, but now the downside here is that if people don't get on board on this, what's going to happen is we're going to turn into kind of like a zombie state, where it's just perpetual, that what we got going on just perpetuates itself and it never gets on board on this. And so I can't stress it enough for us to embrace that whole interdisciplinary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Locke. Mr. Ike Jenkins, please.
Good evening. I was unable to speak last time, and I apologize, but so tonight I'm happy to come. Today only, I received 2 contacts from students, past students, talking about this kind of thing. But it happens with me almost every week. One of the students teaches up at Pioneer High School. He's a vocal music teacher up there. And this conversation came around to what he teaches. He has 3 choirs, 1 jazz choir, and 2 classes that are non-performance classes that have to do with music, history. And so these classes give the students credit and graduation and responsibility and value as well as taking music and learning about it. One of the reasons that I have frustrations throughout school and our music programs is because of an incomplete design of our music curriculum in our schools. We only have, for the most part, performance classes, choir, orchestra, jazz band, and jazz choir, but we very seldom get a chance to teach and help those students who have little or nothing to do with a performance. And I recommend that the music teachers be allowed to teach a more complete program which is relevant to the music industry. Such things as sound protection, music history, composition, styles, forms, there's even theory. There's so many things that we could be doing with our music programs to expand it and help students who are not necessarily performers. That's the main thing that I'm trying to force myself to focus on right now. Years ago, I had a class at Dos Pueblos where we studied composition. We learned sound, vision, recording, directing. We happened to be visited by the board of principals who were observing for an award called the Blue Ribbon School. We were later evaluated, and that came up, and that board in particular valued that class. I think it had a lot to do with Dos Pueblos being chosen as one of the Blue Ribbon schools. Anyway, they were liking that, and one of the students that contacted me today
30
talked
seconds.
about that. So thank you. I'll come back again. I'm going to be probably a polite nuisance.
Mr. Rich Lashua, followed by Nadine Lissing.
Sorry. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to share. I was encouraged at the last meeting to hear from the board about the value of a music education and the impact it had made in their own lives. Imagine a balloon that's not fully inflated. If you grasp it at the middle, you can squeeze it rather tightly, so tight that there's hardly anything in the center, but the top and bottom sections will respond and appear to inflate to a robust appearance, reminding us of when it was first fully inflated. In fact, the unsqueezed ends are actually now more vulnerable to bursting than the entire balloon was earlier. This is an accurate depiction of VAPA education in the district and is a site model for each of our junior high schools. On the district level, it's quite simple for the administration to hear concerns about VAPA and then see a robust elementary program where 100% of students are receiving music education, or the quality high school performances by dozens of musicians, actors, and dancers, and conclude that the programs are doing just fine. There's obviously still air in the balloon, and there are two beautiful ends that look good as new, maybe even better. Unfortunately, the squeeze is on our junior high schools, who are a microcosm of this balloon effect felt district-wide. With only one elective offering mandated for every student, all of the electives are pitted against each other. VAPA programs only flourish at the junior high level when they have little to no competition. Almost entirely across the board, the music and theater programs are most vibrant in zero-period jazz bands, after-school theater programs, and so on. We teach them to perform, but precious little time is left for anything else. To further complicate things, even during the regular day, there are students that are removed by the system before we even begin because their singular elective has already been chosen for them by a program such as a second English class, a second math class, AVID, II, or YSS. These are the students who most desperately need positive places to plug into school due to their unique struggles. And we insist that if they want what everyone else has access to, they must put in the extra time to do it before or after school. Not exactly the most motivating message when you're already taking 2 classes of your worst subject, or trying to deal with enough problems at home that just making it to school in the first place is a victory. I've recently suggested the idea of restoring the 7th period to the junior high schools because it lets our balloon breathe and the air gets distributed a bit better. It's a very expensive undertaking, but it has considerable merit for the students our LCAP is supposed to be most actively targeting. Maybe there are other, better options, But hopefully this gives everyone a better
30
picture
seconds.
of what we're dealing with so we can find out together. It's not about enrollment, it's about access and equity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nadine Lissing, followed by Jim Mooley.
Hello. Good evening, Superintendent and board members. My name is Nadine Leasing, a former student from La Colina and San Marcos, as well as a product of both of their instrumental music programs. And in light of the recent discussions being made concerning these programs, I'd like to just contribute my takeaway from the 6 years I spent as a student in instrumental music. Looking back on it all, I think that one of the most beautiful things about these programs is that it brings people together. These programs are made of students who come from a variety of different backgrounds and experiences who, in spite of these differences, can unite in their passion for music and work toward a common goal. This program allowed us to see our strengths and give us an opportunity to use them for something bigger than ourselves. It taught us how to value one another and to support each other in achieving our greatest potential. If we look at our country today, I'm sure that many of us in this room can agree that our country is in desperate need of more people who respect and value each other in this way. This program has changed me into someone who knows how to use their voice to stand up for what they believe in. In the grand scheme of things, it has taught us that we all have something to offer this place, that we all have the potential to make a difference. These are the kinds of students our music educators are bringing up. Students who are no strangers to the idea of diligence and hard work and who know their place in this world. To not do everything in your power to support these educators and their programs is simply a disservice to our students and ultimately our community. So I encourage you to listen to these parents and educators and to take action towards supporting these programs, all of which have done so much for students like myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Mooley, please, followed by our last speaker, Eric Heidner.
Hi, thanks for having me again. I want to thank the board members for their statements at the last meeting. That was very touching, and it's nice to know that arts education has affected you all so deeply. Where Mr. Lashwood talked about the macrocosm, I'm going to talk about the microcosm. And that is the La Colina situation. At the last board meeting, we had a staffing presentation. Ms. Parker was kind enough to ask for a future report. I really look forward to that report, and I haven't seen it on the agenda yet, and I know maybe that's going to be the next meeting. But the fact of the matter is, at La Colina right now, we do have a 134 number of enrollment. The numbers that were shown up here were incorrect. They did not include the drumline kids, so you might want to ask about that as well. That drumline is a 7th period class that I believe those students are assigned to Mr. Ortiz. So you might want to make sure that those numbers are absolutely accurate. It's 134. So let's see, where was I going? I should have written down notes. But the fact of the matter is we do need to get the wheels rolling if we're going to save the program at La Colina. And what I would ask the board members to do at this time is if there's any way that you can facilitate a meeting between the district representatives. The VAPA coordinator is wonderful, but she doesn't have power. We need the movers and shakers here. Superintendent, assistant superintendent, we need Jeff Peterson, and we need Dan Garski from Dos Pueblos High School at the table together, along with at least 2 board members, to get this situation worked out. I would ask, I beg you, to get this happening so that we don't lose those kids at La Colina, because as Assistant Superintendent Carey said last time, students aren't required to get their first choice of elective, but those kids aren't going to come back to band. We're going to lose them. San Marcos will lose those kids. So you're not going to see those numbers in the future either. And when you see the atrophy at the high schools, it's directly attributed to the bottleneck that Richard was talking about at the junior high. So any way to ameliorate that, that would be such a feather in your cap as a board, and I really look forward to your efforts and continuing that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heidner.
Thank you. Mr. Mui has always been a better improviser than I have in music, and he said very many things that I also want to point out. I want to thank the board members for their supportive statements last time. I didn't get to speak last time, but I just wanted to go ahead and point out I very much agree with the La Colina situation statements that Mr. Muiz pointed out. One thing I would say that you may wish to consider, we would love, of course, to see a 7-period situation at all the junior highs again. I realize the expenses that go along with that. One of the things that could really help out is La Colina's principal has a very good solution that's happening over there, and that is the performing arts students are allowed to do a 7th period PE, just the performing arts students. So it doesn't involve such a high cost expenditure as putting all of the 7-period days back at all this. If we could see those being cloned at the other junior highs, especially Santa Barbara Junior High, I think that would open up a lot of opportunities for these kids who have to take 2 English classes or 2 math classes. I think that would be a big, big help for the music programs there. The other things, as Mr. Mui was pointing out, is you have a person over there at La Colina. He's been basically teaching 5 classes and getting paid for 3. And so we understand that there's a budget set for that, but basically he's being underpaid for what he's been doing. He's getting a 0.6 job for a 1.0 position, and we need to find a way to rectify that. And I very much agree we should go ahead. We would love to have a meeting, as Mr. Mui pointed out, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Garsky, these are veterans who've seen this district's music programs for many years evolve. We want to help. We want to open this dialogue. I did send out a message about a week ago, and I realize, of course, that Ms. Reed is out on vacation, so maybe we haven't had a chance to all talk about this, but we really want to get together and get these things sorted. The other 2 big points besides La Colina, as I said, the Santa Barbara Junior High situation, and Ms. Parker, thank you for your supportive comments on that. We really want to see the ability to get these kids streamlined, sort of an express route to be able to take those arts classes over there and really push that. And the other concern we really still have is Santa Barbara High School. We still are very confused as to whether the Santa Barbara High School music position that is being now offered is a full-time one, a part-time one. If it is a full-time one next year, will it be continuously that, considering we have such low numbers at the incoming junior high? We have 2 great former Santa Barbara High School music students who would love to come up and teach and take over that program, but they cannot move until they know that they'd have a full-time situation that would be at least guaranteed for not just 1 year. So we really hope that these can be addressed in a meeting as soon as possible, and please, if you get a chance to go ahead and look through my written points, we'd really appreciate that, and we'd love to set up a time as soon as possible to get these addressed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, thank you. So our next item, motion to accept donations.
Move to accept with gratitude.
I second.
Moved by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Capps. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous and it passes. So our consent agenda, board members, are there any items you'd like to pull? No items. Need a motion.
I move to accept the general consent items.
Okay,
Second.
second. Motion made by Paredes Ulloa, second by Ms. Parker. All in favor?
Aye.
Item passes. As we move along to our action agenda. So F1, I need a motion.
In the case of 2017840, a stipulated agreement, move to, I'm sorry,
Yes.
expulsion, approve the recommendation of expulsion with enforcement suspended for 1 school year, which ends January 2019.
Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And in the case of 20178-48 stipulated agreement. I move to accept the recommendation of full expulsion ending one school year, which ends June 2019.
Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and I'll just note that the number is 201718.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for both of those, for F1 and F2.
Okay. All right, F3.
In the case of 20161752, petition for re-entry from expulsion, I move to accept the recommendation for re-entry. Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
And in the case of 201617-64, petition, I move to accept the petition for re-entry from expulsion.
Second.
Second.
Moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item passes unanimously. Thank you. So we move to action item F5, approval of Santa Barbara Charter School renewal. Mr. Matsuoka.
So Santa Barbara Charter School has reached the end of their 5-year window on their last charter petition. So this is now the renewal beginning July 1, 2018. And so there's really 3 approvals that are lined up. So there's the petition, there's an MOU, and then there's the facility use agreement. And there were just conversations email-wise today that maybe we should just address as part of this. And Ms. Jate was in conversation with Ms. Parker and with Ms. Donner, just trying to get the right language nailed down. It has to do with the diversity plan and making sure that we as the authorizer and you as the petitioners clearly understand our goals and expectations. Careful, no more accidents. And so since Ms. Jate is at the podium, let's let her speak to that item. Let the board ask any questions, because that's really a global part of all of this.
So the question was, in the MOU, there was mention of the plan. And it was brought to our attention that there was to my attention, because I didn't realize this, that there was a diversity plan in the 2013-2018 petition. And so I spoke with Ms. Donner, and we talked about this, and so now I have that 2013 diversity plan, plus she's already started working on a draft to update the 2018 to 2022 plan. And so we will work together to make sure that the diversity plan, the petition, the diversity plan, and the MOU all are saying the same thing, and then hopefully we can bring that back to you on, if you approve, on consent or do action, whatever you would like.
Ms. Parker.
Thank you so much, and I am sorry that I was emailing people last night about this, but yes, because I had just, in looking at the MOU, I realized I had just assumed that the diversity plan was an appendix because it's brought up in the LCAP that is part of the petition. And of course, it had been in the 2013. And so I completely, I mean, Santa Barbara Charter has been great about moving forward with all of this. And I would be very happy if it came back on consent as just an addition to, because I was trying to figure out where does it go? Is it, and maybe it makes most sense that it's an addendum to the petition that because it's referenced in the MOU. That probably it belongs as an addendum to the petition. That would be my suggestion, and I think we can move forward with everything else, including passing the petition with the understanding that an updated diversity plan would come to the board on consent.
And I think it would be a good idea to identify it as the diversity plan, which is attached as an addendum to the petition. So when someone's looking at this, they know that there's another document out there that they're referencing to.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, so that's great, and thank you. And again, I'm sorry that I was catching all this last night. And And obviously, you've already heard from Santa Barbara Charter. I got to be at their last meeting for once because there's tended to be conflict, and I'm the board rep to that meeting, and it was fantastic to see the Circle of Trustees working their way through their important end of the year processes. Definitely a really high functioning charter, and I would be thrilled to make the motion to approve the petition for the Santa Barbara Charter School renewal.
And are you going to add, is that the language adding the addendum to bring back?
With the, with the understanding that a updated diversity plan addendum will come to us as a future consent agenda item.
Thank you. Need a second?
Second.
Oh, yes. Moved by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Paredes. Mr. Paredes, you are all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. So F6.
You're not done yet.
Okay, next is the MOU. Ms. Jute?
So this is the MOU we were just discussing, and so ditto. There's another item that I wanted to point out that was pointed out to us is that there was some confusion about that there's classroom base and there is a independent study piece to the enrollment. And so what you see in the MOU, definitely in the FUA, is that the cap on the classroom base is 285. But they also have in the MOU under 7 on page 8 of 16, it says that their cap on home-based programs is 75. I don't believe that the Santa Barbara Charter has ever hit that 75 independent study. There are right now about 51 enrolled for independent study, and their total ADA is about 287. So it's not that many students for independent study.
Ms. Parker?
So you see it under A, right smack in the middle of the
There you go.
enrollment ADA.
Yes.
And this may be a Ms. Donner question, if you want to come on up. And that came up for me because I could see on DataQuest that the enrollment last year was at 287. And so obviously we have a cap at 285. And so one question I had was, how do we monitor enrollment on that? And then this is just a technical question. I didn't know where to look at the CDE for the home-based partnership enrollment. I don't know where they keep track of that because it's not, I mean, those kids aren't tested, they're not part of your school.
They are, exactly. They're
Yeah.
part of our school, they're
Yeah.
part of that, this year was what, 292? So they're a part of that, they are tested every year, they're included in our students, and
So
they're
when
part
I
of
looked
our.
when I looked at DataQuest and it said that your enrollment was 287, that was including the home-based partnership.
Correct.
So your actual site-based enrollment, but
about
we can't tell-
240.
240.
It's
So
about
we
240.
can't see the breakdown there.
You could probably see it in Aries because we have long-term
Yeah.
independent study students are enrolled in a certain code through Aries compared to the daily
Okay.
students.
So the district can see it, but the state doesn't necessarily know it.
The state
The state doesn't break it apart.
doesn't break it apart in DataQuest or in the test scores, for example.
So those kids do get tested?
Yes,
although I
we
assume
meet
you
our
have-
95% every year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I would have thought that a lot of those parents would not be interested in that.
You would be correct, and we invite them to help us meet that 95%.
Okay, so when we see that number, we're seeing home-based and charter together, and that is exactly what my question was, so I really appreciate getting that answered.
Yeah.
That's awesome, thank
Sure,
you.
sure.
And this was also the piece where it came up about the diversity plan. This is in the MOU, and so it'll just be nice to know that that will be aligned and, once that addendum comes forward.
Right, and it will refer to the diversity plan that's an addendum to the petition, so we
Okay.
know where to go.
All right, so that language will get updated.
So I guess my request is that we approve the MOU, or you approve the MOU with the changes, and it comes back on consent, or just back on consent? I guess you're
It
just
come
back on
consent.
consent.
Well,
Sorry.
does it need to come back on consent if we just direct those changes at this point? I think that we can move approval with the changes as listed.
As directed, yes.
As directed.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay. Moved by Ms. Parker, seconded by Mr. Paredes.
I'm going to make you practice. 6 months.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, Mr. J, one more. F7, recommendation approval of the 2023 facility use agreement between Santa Barbara Unified School District and Santa Barbara Charter.
So this is basically the facility use agreement. It is the facility use agreement, and it just states out, it drafts out, what their responsibilities are for their facilities and what the district will provide, how many students, what rooms they're going to use. So it's pretty basic, and it'll also have the estimated fees on the back. This changes every year, obviously, because fees come and go. I'm sorry, that's in the MOU, sorry. But we do charge a facility use fee, and they have that copy of how I come up with that calculation, and it's all, the calculation is all done by the state. They tell you how to conduct it, to figure it. So again, I was hoping to have this approved tonight.
I just had a question out of curiosity. Is it the same, so it's the same footprint plan? Because I know, having been there, you are a little tight, but the same
Yep.
status quo.
Great.
Thanks.
And I just had a question, because I was noticing that we had 2014 to 2015, which is a year, but now are we aligning it with the 5-year agreement now? Because I noticed we're going from 2018 to 23, so.
Yeah, the facility use agreement, which should be the same, except the only thing that we need to work on is that if anything changes, if a building, if they do something and it needs a different kind of service from us, and we need to document that, we can do an addendum, or we can do, update the FUA.
So is that what you're asking, that language is somewhere in either in the MOU or in here, so that, should it be in here? Okay,
Yes.
it's in here? What you just said about updating, should it need be?
Well, we usually have these FUAs for 1 year.
Okay.
And in my whole time I've been doing, I think this is I've been here almost 10 years, so this is my second time doing I do these, we don't do these every year, even though it's a 1-year contract. So that's why I decided that if I don't look at it or we don't touch it, and we're all in agreement with, what needs to be done, why do it as a yearly? Because we don't do it yearly anyway, So.
Just because time constraints of not doing it yearly?
No,
or-
I don't think much changes. They've been in there since 1992. I mean, and they have the same facilities, and every time that we add something like their playground or a resurface or anything, that's all in a facility agreement, like a bond project or something. So we really, unless something major changes, we wouldn't get back into it. But I don't think anybody would mind if we did say, hey, there needs to be a change one way or the other.
Yeah, I was just thinking if that language should be in here, that should there be a change, we will agree or do an addendum to it. So I'm
Okay,
just saying,
I
we
can add that.
language? Yes.
Absolutely. You can do that with the MOU, too.
Okay, right. Need a motion?
I'll move approval with the language change as directed by Ms. Sims Moten.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Capps. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Motion
you.
passes. Thank you. Yay. You're supposed to say yay. That's a little weak over there. Okay.
You want to say farewell to Dave Weissman because he is
Oh,
no
yes.
longer with Santa Barbara Charter.
Congratulations.
3 more days.
3 more days.
Yes. Okay, congratulations.
And Wendy Cantor.
Oh, Wendy.
Congratulations on both of
Okay.
your retirements, that's true.
Feeling they'll be seeing us around.
We'll next move to item F8, approval of resolution 2017-18-61, approving the guaranteed maximum price, authorizing the contractor to proceed with construction, adopting plans and specifications for the Dos Pueblos High Stadium turf and track replacement. Mr. Vizzolini.
Yes, this is an action item. We're asking the board to approve this resolution for Lash Construction, and I'm open for questions, which I'm sure there will be a couple.
Do you have any questions, board?
I wasn't sure if maybe Mr. Paredes Uyala did on this one, because you had a question that I think that could be good for the public to hear.
Okay, so when I was looking at the contract, and Mr. Vizzolini already answered this, so thank you. One of the things that I noticed was the breakdown of work. It listed the track contractor, the field contractor, and Lash all as doing the track and field installation. And thankfully, you explained that they're more semantics, and I get it. It's slight, cutting hair or whatever, splitting hairs. But it kind of feels more like prep. They're prepping the field for installation. They're prepping the track for.
That's accurate.
Yeah, because it's a public document, and to me, I even consulted my dad. I'm like, wait, does this sound weird to you? And it sounded kind of hairy to him, and he worked in construction for over 30 years. So, just so with the understanding for the public that, again, wording's a little bit off, but there is no double dipping. There is no, double pay for the same work already being done.
That's correct.
Okay.
Have a motion?
We'll move to approve.
And I second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Paredes Ulloa, second by Ms. Capps. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Item F9, adopting Resolution 2017-18-62, the Education Protection Act, and approval of the spending plan for the state EPA funds to be received in fiscal year 2018-19. Mr. Day.
Thank you, board members. So the adoption of Resolution 2017-18-62 has been in a requirement from the state of California ever since Prop 30 was passed, and districts are required to do a spending plan from the prior year, or from 2000. It would be this year, but to me it's already prior year. So a spending plan, and to ensure that salaries and benefits are not being taken out of this EPA money for administrators, and that we posted on our website and shows to illustrate that. So the second page of this document is our actuals that we spend the funds on, and they're all in teacher salaries. So we do this every year. We just move the salaries over there. And then we need the resolution for the approval of the spending plan for the EPA funds, and to receive for the fiscal year of 18-19, which you see up here. And we also in the resolution. So we're asking for basically two approvals of the same thing.
Any questions? Any motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Ms. Parker, second by Ms. Capps. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. F10, approval of local control accountability plan 2017-20. Ms. Carey and Mr. Ramirez.
Good evening, Ms. Sims Moulton. Good evening, board. We are bringing back to you the local control accountability plan for years 17 through 20. I want to also extend my apologies to the board for the challenges that existed last Friday in posting the plan. We did encounter some technical difficulties with the platform that we use, so my apologies for that delay for you and for the public as well. But not much. Just wanted to make a couple of notes. One is that nothing really materially has changed from the last version that you saw. In essence, what we did was, what has transpired, however, since you last saw it, is that we did receive feedback from the county education office, the Santa Barbara County Education Office. They were very gracious, very supportive in providing us a great deal of feedback and things for consideration that were either technically, to make the document more technically sound, or just incoherences minor incoherences that may have existed, or that may not be fully clear to the public. So the intent is to make it as transparent a process as possible, and to document year to year both changes, improvements, and also outcomes by way of student progress in all of the different domains. So what you see here is a plan that does account for the vast majority of that. There will be some changes, modifications, I should say, to the plan summary, but that has to do more with aligning it to some elements of the California School Dashboard. But in addition to that, or the other modifications are going to be really minor based on some technical revisions that we will continue to work out with the County Office of Ed. So I just wanted to make sure I represented that to you and to the public. And we are, Ms. Carey and I, and Ms. Maria Larios Horton are also here to just receive your feedback and hopefully approval.
Okay, comments from the board? Ms. Parker?
Just thank you. Especially, so it's just language, I mean, we didn't obviously see any kind of red line. I assume it was just minor language changes and technical changes, because what I saw looked great, and it looked like it carried forward pretty much. I didn't catch what the county got. But that's terrific. So when you talk about changes or minor modifications in the future, is that to this document? Is that something that's going to have to come back to us for a consent vote or something, or is it something that the state will accept these types of modifications without board action?
It's a great question. The state defaults to the county office as its proxy, and so the county education office does approve our LCAP. Okay. But before bringing it to you, we felt and we in discussions received reasonable assurances that would not prohibit us from moving forward. And those revisions, we know fully what they are. There may be some others, but they're more, again, on the technical realm that would not require at this point any future board action on your part.
Thank you, and I actually meant to ask this last time, but it was so late. So now with fresh eyes, I just think it's important to note, I mean, all the work that's gone into it. This is a 192-page document and a relatively new process, and just the community involvement for a couple months. You laid out in the design plans what kind of outreach happened. I know a lot of effort went into that to engage parents in different groups. Can you speak to any commonality and feedback that you received? Just want to keep that in mind as this moves forward.
If you could maybe clarify the question a little bit further, because the feedback that we received was significant. So if maybe you could speak to whether it was via actions, expenditures, goals.
I guess, yeah, I can speak to my concern is that, just the acronym itself is somewhat obtuse, and does the community understand what this is? If it sounds like they do, if you had an overwhelming amount of feedback, but that's my intention and hope or aspiration is that this, that we, and I think you've done so, just make it as user-friendly as possible. I was happy to see in the potential website redesign that it's going to be a feature on our website. I think when you toss out on the word LCAP, no one really knows what you're talking about. So if I would, out of curiosity and interest, if parents were concerned about if there was sort of one thing or two things that rose to the top, that would show me that they understand that they have this ability to weigh in during a 2-month process in which feedback is being sought, and B, I just am curious what those concerns would be.
I will give you my thoughts, or I will do my best to represent what I experienced and broadly as possible, but also to try to add specificity to your question. But I will also invite Ms. Carey, who also has a very important perspective to share, to do so as well. The feedback that comes to us comes in many shapes and forms. So we try to capture the essence of it by way of the stakeholder engagement section of the plan, where there were either events or opportunities for the public to give an opinion. To your question of whether the public or a parent would understand what the LCAP means, I think we still got a lot of work to do in that arena, recognizing that while some of our parents have been parents and have been in our schools for a number of years, each year we get a whole new group of parents that come to us for the very first time, with whom we need to engage and establish rapport and just continue to orient them to the things that we do and how their involvement is both welcome and effectively channeled, right? Whether by events or just the day-to-day interactions that happen. To your question of what came across, I would say that I would point to, and I made reference to this the last time around, our LCAP committee, our LCAP Parent Advisory Committee, was tremendous and incredible in terms of their feedback. And some of the other survey items also came through and spoke to achievement continuing to be one of those areas that is the most at the forefront of where our parents and families' concerns lie. The outcomes for our students in some areas have not gained the kind of traction that we would love to see, and we need to continue to evaluate what we do in relation to that. And so what the committee allowed us to do was delve a little deeper than we would with an average parent around our inner workings and the things that we've done that maybe have not yet materialized into the kinds of results that we would like to see. And many of them, of course, are cultural. What I mean by that is to the culture of the district, of our schools, recognizing that we're all coming from a place or have experienced a history here a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so how to orient ourselves, be more coherent about the goals that we're trying to accomplish. All of those, it was a phenomenal opportunity for us to really engage with parents, with some of our teachers, staff, to both receive their input, but also share with them what we've been doing. But by far, the outcomes and the disproportionality that exists amongst our students has continues to be the area that has garnered the most attention, and understandably so. So I would also invite Ms. Carey to offer a perspective.
Thank you.
I agree with everything Dr. Ramirez said. Good evening, Board. I would just add three things that are sort of macro. One would be that because this is our second year of the three-year plan, it's just gratifying to see that every year we do, I think, a better and better job all the time of educating people about what is the acronym LCAP. I think a couple of you were here the night we had the community stakeholder meeting, and you saw we kind of opened with just, what do those letters mean, and what is LCFF, and what part of our district's overall budget are we really focusing in here on? And then if you take it to the layer of the LCAP Advisory Council or Committee, which was very representative this year, a really rich group, as Dr. Ramirez said, we did an even better job bringing forward tools than we've done in the past that helped also give people sort of historical context about how schools in California are funded generally, so that people could really appreciate sort of what LCFF and LCAP are, not just in and of themselves, the goals and priorities and how those align, but also contextual and historical information about funding models in California, which, it's easy to take for granted that people might appreciate that, but there's something to be really, I think, taught and learned around those kinds of things that are particular to California. The third thing I would just want to highlight that has to do with just making sure that our community, we're doing a better and better job all the time of engaging our community, is that we've always made sure that our LCAP exists in Spanish, and that materials that support both the process and the ultimate product are translated in a high quality way by our language access unit. And I don't think that, I want to make sure we don't take that for granted, because I've been reminded even recently that that's not a common practice necessarily. So I just want to also appreciate the acknowledgement about how much work it is to produce the document itself, but then also appreciate that in parallel it's always being translated. And so even the minor modifications we're making, we have tracking systems for making sure that there's full language access.
How would one be on the advisory, how's the advisory, is it a council chosen, if someone were to be interested?
Well, do you want to take it first, Tim?
The committee, it's a committee.
Right.
And the committee has, some of it has been historical, some of our folks have been with us for several years, particularly on the staff side. We actually have outreach to site administrators, site leadership, to also give us names, and we have very intentionally looked at audiences from across the grade spans, from preschool all the way through high school and our alternative ed space, but also focused on the primary focus of the LCAP, which is our 3 student groups. But that is something that we are actually looking at revisiting. How can we get an even more robust or more fluid kind of entry point for some of our parents, recognizing that the richness, I think, that comes from the committee is in serving more than once, because that's when people really see the changes happen, over time. And that's also what we're working on is making sure that we reach a certain level of common knowledge so that then we can see it, over time. But that is an area that I think we can definitely improve on, is how to maybe have a more organic or a more open way of inviting the right representation.
I'll just piggyback 2 comments too. This year, we did a better job with our aspiration to make it very parent-intensive, to make that the most robust group represented. And then I also don't want to neglect to add that we had really good participation on the part of students, high school students, and that's been very enriching to the process. So
That's
we're
fantastic.
looking for more opportunities for that.
So what kind of ballpark number of parents?
I think the whole committee probably has around 25 people. Not everybody comes to every
Sure.
convening of that committee. And at least half, I think, in our original roster were parent roles. So there's also significant overlap with DLAC.
Sure.
And with Site ELACs is a place that we go to. But we were very intentional about making sure parents of all backgrounds, but that definitely there was representation of parents who can speak to the experience of students who are our unduplicated pupils.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Paredes, you are?
So I just want to first appreciate everyone who worked on this. I saw Dr. Ramirez, I saw Ms. Larios Horton, I saw Ms. Carey working on this last week, and it looked like they were sweating bullets, trying to get it to us by Friday. So appreciate all the hard work you put into this, and I know it's not easy for everyone involved, not just folks I mentioned, but I know it's not easy to get something like this out. I did have a couple questions, or questions/comments. The language access piece, I'm really happy to see that we're really just kind of really concentrate on that in the next few years, which for me is really huge. Again, talking about how do we get the LCAP information out to them, but how do we relay any kind of information out? You did talk about kind of working with the language access division, and I was wondering if there's anything that we've started to research, any practices that we've kind of looked into, or is that still kind of in the planning stages for this coming year? And that's topic number 1. So I'll leave that there.
Well, if I could speak broadly to the practices, I think that's where I would say that, building on years of the last few years in particular of very intentional work in this space, I think Ms. Maria Larios Horton brings a tremendous perspective and value to this conversation. So I don't mean to put her on the spot, but I will also say that we have every year tried to address through resource allocation, but perhaps more importantly, through just a smarter approach and a smarter set of conditions to try to narrow the gap that exists in terms of language access with our parents. So I know that that's been something that we've certainly talked about. We meet on a regular basis, and I can tell you that everything is every year on the table, from the coordination around back to school night and how that has evolved as one more strategic example, to just again, the resources and how we target those resources, how we connect with individuals in the community who give us, who can partner with us to support those efforts, as well as ongoing training and development for our staff. I think that's something that would be great for us to be able to bring the board up to speed on, just how many individuals we train with very robust homegrown trainings that have helped us in this process. More to come on that in terms of the approaches that you were alluding to, because we do recognize that there are still rather significant gaps that exist for our parents who are monolingual and who need more support in being able to communicate effectively with our staff and in the betterment of their students.
And actually, not leaving that topic just yet. One of the things that I've heard from some parents is they don't feel supported in the interpretation translation piece, you know, for like PTA, ELAC, well, not ELAC, but PTA, any other parent groups. Is that, I was just wondering kind of broadly, what is our kind of philosophy around that? Do we kind of let the parent groups do it on their own? I kind of thought we supported them, but I'm not too sure.
I can't tell you that we support them from district resources in terms of PTAs. I know that some of our parent-teacher organizations, whether they be foundations or PTAs, more traditional PTAs, have begun to either allocate resources through their own funds, or where schools have in effect identified portions of their budget to be able to pay hourly employees, or our range of community interpreters that assist in this. It's a space for sure that we need to improve on. I would say that prioritizing in that arena is also going to be very important. The need is great and the need exists everywhere. But unfortunately, we won't have the resources at the ready to be able to deploy them into every single spot, so we will need to continue to be very strategic, very diligent, and prioritizing the spaces and times when that are really high leverage for parents in terms of receiving critical information about the school or about their kids' learnings. But needless to say, it is a space that we will continue to look forward to and develop. But just to answer your question directly, there's probably some variety and variability in terms of where sites are, but I can tell you that collectively they are trending toward addressing more and more, and for us to coordinate with them from district office resources and staffing.
Okay. And just, you know, kind of the way I see interpretation, or at least translation, like more of the written, most commonly it's about translating the words as opposed to the message. I just hope we're going towards that trend more and more strongly, because I think that's kind of where any missteps we have had have kind of been born out of that. And I understand, again, there's always there's always something going on, there's always a priority, there's always something to get out quick, but really looking at the message as opposed to the words written in another language is really going to help out, and goes back to the other pieces about the cultural proficiency, with HR practices, with bringing on ethnic studies, just, again, making the spaces more welcoming for our parents as well, not just our students, but, everyone to feel like they can connect to that. And last piece, I swear, is just an appreciation for, again, the LCAP. I really, I love reading the pieces about continuing and strengthening, or even just starting some of our practices, the pieces around, continuing peak, strengthening that, mental health services that Ms. Wagnick Dr. Wagnick brought back to us last board meeting and the board meeting before that, the contracts. I mean, I think that's fantastic. Continuing with RA as one of our practices, because I think it's one of those pieces, maybe this is also a messaging piece, is just kind of getting it more out there. Because I know our students get it, and I have heard from some staff and admins that RA can sometimes be ununiformly practiced at different schools. So, seeing that, continuing that, but also letting parents know, again, like, this is going on, this is happening. This isn't when I was a kid where you got in trouble, that was it. Slap on the hand, you got detention or suspension, that was it. It is more about students kind of claiming their power, claiming responsibility, But again, I'm just really thrilled to see this. It was a hefty item to read through, but I'm sure it was heftier to write and to put together. So just appreciations all around for all the work that went into it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And if I can make a comment, I think it goes back to Ms. Cap's initial thoughts and questions. Not quite ready for prime time yet, but there is, the platform that we use does have the ability to provide an executive summary. It's still a little lengthy, but it's certainly better than what we've had. That is going to be, because to your point, 192 pages is not consumer, as much as we try, is not consumer friendly. It's not friendly for parents or families. It's full of vernacular that is very much rooted in education and our practices. So in a way to just continue to provide opportunities for community and families to understand this a bit better, we are going to set our sights to polishing up some summaries and some infographics that can start to yield better understanding and at least a common way to approach a plan as important but yet robust as this. So I didn't want to fail to mention that as well.
Any additional comments or questions? Okay, need a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Cap, second by Mr. Frazier. All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passes. And hey, good work. Thank you so much. So item 11, adoption of the Santa Barbara Unified School District 2018-19 fiscal year budget. Ms. Jate.
Thank you, board members. So this is 2018-19 budget report for all funds for the Santa Barbara Unified School District is being presented to the board for adoption. And I remember last year we had a little bit of confusion, and I know it was some people's first year adopting an adopted budget, which is kind of redundant, but yes. The adopted budget is labeled this from the state of California. It's called the adopted budget, even though in Form 1 in SACS, it's called original budget, which would have been the better name for it, but it is called adopted, even though you have not adopted it yet. So I just wanted to make that really clear, in case you had forgotten this part. So let's talk about a little bit about the economy. No, I keep referring back to the Thomas Fire and the January mudslides, and not only did it cause devastation to our community, both emotionally, but also in property values. We had the loss in property reduced Santa Barbara's funding from property taxes by approximately 2.3, we thought. And then the state of California, or the governor said, hey, we're going to backfill you that amount of money. We have not had any real confirmation of the dollar amount when it's coming, but we did put it back into our property taxes. We will get the money from the county. The county will be reimbursed by the state of California. So it will come in through property taxes. If it's dollar for dollar, I'm assuming it is. And in the past, when they've done things like this, it was dollar for dollar. But we have not had any official document on that yet. But I want to state that it is in, we're planning as if we were going to get a dollar for dollar. I want to show an illustration because what I'm about to explain is kind of difficult. So Brian, if you could pull up that one chart. Because writing this in a narrative is just insane. So I decided to do a chart that shows where and how we're funded and who's going to determine how we're funded. So we know more than the state. The state doesn't know how much our property taxes are going to be this year. The state doesn't know our ADA. The state doesn't know a lot of things about Santa Barbara, but we do. So in 17-18, we knew we were going to be community funded. But the state of California said, no, you're LCFF until probably P2, which is now certified. But they'll be notifying the county auditor treasurer's office in August saying they're basic aid. So the county goes by that, and they define us as basic aid. So what happens then? Well, we lose supplemental property taxes. That's also in the budget, that once you're basic aid, or community funded, you no longer receive supplemental taxes. That's everything that happens in between the billing cycles of property taxes. So even though next year Santa Barbara Unified states we're LCFF, the CDE will look at us as a community-funded district. In 1920, we finally say, hey, we're back into community-funded. But then the state of California is looking at 1819 and saying, no, you're not. You're going back in, you're LCFF. But you know what? They'll give us our supplemental. So even though we're community funded, we'll get the supplemental back then. Then finally, in 2021, if all my crystal balls are in alignment, we should all be saying, yes, we are community funded. The only thing that would probably throw us out of community funded if AB 2808 passes, and that's upping the base grant from 7,000 roughly to 11,000, and the state would have to come into quite a bit of funds to do that, but maybe they'll raise it to 9,000. So anytime the state messes around with the base grant, that's going to make us go in and out of basic aid if it's higher than our property tax value, our assessed value. So I just thought this was an easier way to see it than writing it out, because it gets really confusing. So the reason why we fall out of community funding is a few things. One, they fully funded LCFF sooner than anticipated. The state increased the cost of living adjustment. It's now 3.7%. We lost supplemental and our one-time RDA funds for the sale of property. And then also the loss of excess Environmental Protection Agency money, the EPA money that you guys just approved the resolution on. So how does that work? So if you are an LCFF district and you're really close to becoming community funded, they will not give you a dime more than equals your entitlement. So if our entitlement is 100 million and our property taxes are coming in at 99,000 or 99 million, they will not give us but $100,000. $1 million. I'm doing math in my head, and I try to make it easy too. That's pretty sad. So $1 million of EPA. The minute we go basic aid, they give us all our EPA. So they can't make us basic aid, but as soon as we are basic aid or community funded, we'll get all the money. So we also lose a little bit of that excess money. In the budget also, we did the federal money that we always do. We reduced it by 10% because of the federal government doesn't approve. When they do approve budgets, not until September, October area, and we never know how much we're going to get. However, they do send out a preliminary in the middle of July, so as soon as we get that, we will adjust all the budgets, and if there's money to give out, we'll give it out to the sites and the departments. The legislation update, as I mentioned, Assembly Bill 2808, which is the increase to the base grant, will go to the Senate committee on July 27th. So it's a slight chance that this will pass, but at least it's bringing attention to our issues as far as being underfunded in schools. I went to the EPA forecast projection, and it's always really interesting, but this year it was extremely interesting to me. I learned a lot about tariffs and what happens, and they had two representatives. I'm sorry, did you? No, I'm sorry. No. I thought you were saying I have a question. Sorry. They talked a lot about tariffs, and there were two representatives from Mexico there, and they were saying, one of the gentlemen was saying that, you know, if you put a tariff on corn, U.S., that Mexico imports $1 billion worth of corn. So he went off and said all kinds of things about how he wouldn't support the U.S. If you do this, I'll do that. And we're seeing that right now. That's happening, and you see it on the news all the time. But it was really interesting that how one decision can make such a huge impact on other countries that, you know, I knew it was a big deal, but I didn't realize how big a deal it was. And how so many people do really great things for us in other countries. So also, another thing I thought was really interesting, locally, Santa Barbara is recovering from this recession much slower than Ventura or San Luis Obispo. And they talked about how Santa Barbara really needs to rethink State Street, how you're going to do State Street, you know, because everybody's leaving State Street. And they had some really great ideas, and I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting. A lot of times that can get really dry, but that one was really interesting. So next page, we're talking about the unrestricted revenues. I already spoke about the LCFF, but that decrease is a net of removing the RDAs from the amount of money we got last year, putting back in the loss of property taxes.
Can I just
and-
ask a quick question from Ms.
Sure.
Moten? Do you want us to take questions on each section, or do you want us to hold all questions to the end? What
It
would you
might,
prefer?
are you comfortable having questions in the middle as opposed to
Yeah,
holding to the end?
I think it would be a
That
good
way we can
idea.
have a good dialogue and finish.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you have
So
a
I
question?
have a
Yeah,
couple questions.
that's
One is for the supplemental, you talk about when us popping in and out. Does the state go back retroactively and say, oh, wait, you were community funded, you weren't kidding? No.
No.
Okay, so we don't need to worry about having to give that back.
No.
And then the question that I have on the revenue updates, when you're talking about the 3% growth in property tax, does that take into account the long-term loss of property tax in Montecito that goes to our secondary boundaries?
Yes. So we met several times, as you can imagine, with the county, and they did their projections, and they said that we should be about 2.88. And I always do 3% because I would not want to spend money I don't have if it didn't come in at 3%, but we've been tracking at like 4.5%, 5%, sometimes 6%.
Can I just ask for clarity on when you say 2.88?
Percent.
Percent. So
Growth.
they're saying 2.88%.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, we won't know who rebuilds. We don't know who will sell and somebody else will rebuild, but that's what they're anticipating. That, you know, before they were almost at 6, and now we're down to 2.8. So, you know.
My sense driving around our high school district boundaries, it's balanced out by the housing growth in Goleta.
It's huge, yeah.
It's just everywhere, so. we're
So
okay.
they're saying 2.88 just for the Montecito area? Or for the
No,
for
when
the
they give
Santa
us,
Barbara
when they
County
give us
boundaries?
estimate, it's for our taxing entity area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I spoke about the LCFF. The federal money that we have in there right now, 188,000 is from MAW, and that is a federal program. And so we usually budget, once we receive it, we'll budget for it because it takes forever to receive the funds.
Mr. Tate, is
Yeah.
that because it's from a previous year? Do we accrue it? Or,
No, because we don't necessarily know exactly how much we're getting. We send in the reports, they do their analysis, and we don't hear from them for like 18, 24 months.
okay.
And it's not, if it were millions, you bet, we would figure out some way to do it, but it's not, on the big picture, it's not material.
Okay.
Okay, so the, talked about the federal. So the state lottery, or this, the unrestricted state revenue variance due to the increase of mandated one-time funds. Local revenue decreases due to a lower special education administrative fee for Adelante Charter. So Adelante is now its own special ed. So how we charge special ed, which is a formula, charters for special ed, is a formulator driven from the state of California. And basically, you take your total encroachment, you divide it by the total ADA of the district plus the charters, and then you allocate a dollar amount per ADA, P2 ADA. And that's how we get to the contribution. Well, now Santa Barbara Charter is not in there, and they haven't been in for a couple years. Now Adelante's out. So now the pot probably decreased a little bit, over the contribution didn't decrease, but because both the charter school, those two charter schools have very low special ed, but they were helping spread the cost out. And so since they have left, that cost is going up more for now Peabody and ourselves are paying for the full costs of special ed. Because we no longer provide special ed to Santa Barbara Charter and Adelante. Salaries and benefits, on the unrestricted side, the change is caused by the 2% salary increase and step and column movement, and STRS PERS retirement system. The books and supplies, a decrease to moving some of the mandated one-time services down to supplies down to services. So you'll just see a shift in that. Services and operations, the increase is due to additional mandated one-time funds. Cost of property and liability insurance. Our property and liability insurance went up about $350,000 this year. We had a lot of claims in that area. And then once you increase your total expenditures, both unrestricted and restricted, you have to increase your 3% of the general fund total expenditures and budget that for routine restricted maintenance. So when you take state money for facilities, you have to have a routine restricted maintenance of 3% of your total budget so that you can keep your facilities in good repair.
Ms. Jate, on the certificated salaries, that growth to 1819, that's got the 2% raise for next year.
Yeah.
So if you look at the growth of 2.5, 2 of it was salary raise, so.
Salaries, PERS and STRS.
Yeah, so that's actually.
And costs of step and column.
Very modest personnel growth.
I guess I just have a quick question on probably on the layout of this, because there's the 17-18 actuals, estimated actuals, the 18-19 budget, which is an increase.
But you're saying it's negative.
But it's in parentheses and it says minus 2.5%. And so that's why, and that.
That's how we've always done it, though.
Yeah, if you look at the
You have to come up to the mic.
If you look at the SACS forms at the back, that's how they show it. So we keep it consistent with how the form is showing it.
Okay.
I disagree with the SACS form. That just looks weird.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. The SACS form is really what you're approving tonight. That's the official document. It's part of your packet.
Yeah.
So you're saying that for all these years when I've looked at the budget and I've looked at this table, I just have never caught before that it's what looks like is going down is actually going up.
Well, for first interim, we'll change that. But is this your last budget you'll see?
I think so.
Well, it's an optical illusion.
Okay.
We're all our expenses, except for one area, are increasing.
Okay.
So now I'm on the unrestricted other finance and sources. As you see, we typically move in about 1.1 million into our Fund 17. The remaining amount of that 1.4 that you see on that page is to food service or to another fund in our district. But this year, we did 2 million above what we normally do. And so our Fund 17 is growing. And our Fund 17 counts towards our 3% reserve. So it's like our individual savings account, and we're putting money over there. And Mr. Matsuoka says, you know, if we do a 2% increase, we should really do an increase over into our Fund 17 for savings. And that's what we did, and we will continue to do that as long as we can.
I guess just on a related formatting question, though. So in this section, we actually are
increasing, or we are decreasing.
We're decreasing, And so it really is minus 0.7%, not
Yes.
plus 0.7%. And then I noticed the same thing over in the unrestricted revenues, where we really are having a lower number of revenues in the first table that's on page 3, and a lower amount, and so it really is down, so the revenues are down 1.5% for next year, is that correct?
Yes, well, as I said, in the federal, we decreased by 10%. In the other local revenue, that is where all our donation accounts are, all our donation, our community donations, and we do not budget them until the cash is in the bank. So this is why I feel, in my, this is just my opinion, that the adopted budget is probably one of the weakest budgets of the whole year. We will know so much more by first interim, and that would be a more accurate budget, because we'll start getting our donations in from our sites, from our outside community. Currently, that we just don't budget for those because we don't know.
But you don't have any concerns at this point that the way it looks right now, the budget is going forward with 1.5% reduction in revenue, but a 4.3% increase in expenditures. And I just thought it might be good for you to address that.
Well, you're asking a CBO if she worries about a decrease in revenue and an increase of expenditures. The answer is yes, of course. But, 10 years of doing this also, and an additional 6 of reviewing budgets at the school districts, I know that this budget particularly is, if we go back in time, is always higher. Because what we do is we say, we're guessing this and we're guessing that. We have, will we fill all of our paraeducators? In this budget, absolutely, for the entire 9-10 months. Do we know that happens? No, it usually doesn't happen. So there are expenditures in here that we know that probably won't happen, but I have to budget in case they do happen. So that way, you have the money there in case you need to use it somewhere else also. But what we do is we budget what we're told by sites, by departments, by by staffing, as if everything will work perfectly. Well, we know everything doesn't work perfectly, and so that's how I'm going to answer that question.
And I would just, maybe that's something that can become part of the summary, because I get that understanding, here's a budget, what we know right now, knowing 90 days later, such as you said, the revenue may change and may shake out differently. So maybe some, to that degree, explain that in your summary, what that looks like.
Sure.
And, in terms of that, adding that piece to that.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm on restricted financing and other sources that we're expecting to still have a balance in on our restricted side of the budget of 1.2 at the end of 18-19. Oh my gosh. And that's usually from the donation account. Our staff are really good, and our sites are really good at, when they get restricted money, they spend restricted money to the best of their ability. So most of that 1.2 million, we're anticipating that the site's donation counts do not get all the way spent down, because history shows us that's what that number usually is. On the district's reserves and net ending fund balance, on page 10, you can see that in 18-19 we have a slight yellow bar or off-white bar, and that's the restricted amount. The dark purple is the unrestricted funds for 18-19, and you can see in our special reserve, that's where we're holding most of our reserve amount. And so that's okay that we have money in that reserve, because it counts towards our 3% reserve, and it's growing, and so that's a good thing.
Ms. Jate, I'm sorry, can we go back to page 6? And
Sure.
I know this is something I've asked every year, just for the public, in terms of when we talk about deficit spending of $10.8 million, that's not, we're really not in a deficit of 10.8, and we don't have to go get a loan to get that. So just explain that a little bit more in layman terms, what that really is.
Sure, and I'm sorry, I don't know how I passed that up. That's a big slide. So, yes, so we're projecting that we will deficit spend $10.7 million, just for all the reasons why I just said, the decrease in revenue, we don't have, decrease of revenue, and we're anticipating to spend everything that we know knowledge of that we think is going to happen in the expenditures. And so, obviously, if your revenue is less than your expenditures, you're going to deficit spend. Part of that is funds from the mandated one-time money that's been happening now for 4 years. So it's really not one time anymore. But I think this probably will be our last year. We'll have a new governor and in 2019, so that may end. But when we plan for X amount of dollars to be spent for whatever reasons that instruction, the assistant soups and everybody decides to spend on instructional materials, training, all types of things. And when those things don't materialize, it falls to ending fund balance. And then maybe the next year we spend twice as much as we thought we were going to spend the year before. So we're eating away. Some of this is a planned deficit spending, and you can't, if you plan to deficit spend, it's not as bad as, oh my gosh, look how negative we are. We didn't plan it. But some of that, I would say at least maybe possibly about $3 million of that is one-time mandated money.
And plus, you're moving money to the special reserve, which is also an expenditure, which is not always clear.
Exactly.
So that's a huge piece of it.
we plan to move 1.4 million out of the general fund. 1.1 goes to Fund 17.
Can I present a sort of a global picture? I think it was sometime last fall where I presented, so here's where we were at adopted budget, and then showed now that we knew the actuals for last year. So I pulled up the multi-year projection from a year ago. And so there's always this 2 years sort of flushing out of the reality. So 2016-17, we hadn't closed the books on it. We were projected to deficit 3.5 million as we closed out that year. And then we closed the books, but then, new information comes in now it's set for that year. Our surplus that year was 2.8 million. I'm looking at the multi-year projection in this adopted budget. So there's always these swings, and I think Ms. Jate is, she can feel the swings coming. She'll really cry out if she sees something coming our way, but just know that as these years flush out, it starts to equal out. The big move that we took advantage, we just had some one-time money this year, so we put away an extra $2 million in Fund 17. Remember, the goal is 10%. And so by the end of next year, we'll be able to put away another 1.2, 1.17. We're going to finish next year at 10 million in savings, and that's 6.2 in Fund 17. So we're climbing our way, and hey, if we get some good news somewhere down the road, we'll keep saving away as we give raises, as we staff our schools.
So another thing I want to point out, that we are still declining in enrollment, and so I just wanted to point that out a little bit. It's weird because some years are really heavy, and then my projection is they're not so heavy, and then it kind of goes up. So it's all about the live births 5 years ago. So now I'm going to turn.
But before you leave that,
Okay.
just for the public's sake, I think it's important to clarify that when we are a community-funded district, declining enrollment is quite good for
Yes,
education
it is.
of students.
More
So-
property tax, less children to educate.
Yeah, So it's ultimate, it doesn't sound right, but it is.
I know, it doesn't sound right.
We don't want, there are more resources for each individual child.
We want our kids to still come to school, though, and I really want to make that very, can't educate if they don't come.
One child per family.
So now I'm going to turn it over to Lacey Preston. She is the Director of Fiscal Services. Do you want this? Or do you have your own? Okay. I'm just going to back out. Beep, beep. Go sit down so you'll ask for approval.
I'm just going to quickly go over the multi-year projection. A lot of the points have already been touched on. Can you go down to the multi-year projection? We've already talked about how we budget a 3% increase for property taxes. So we continue that 3% increase in 1920 and 2021. We also have increased down in the salary and benefits. We've increased those expenditures by the increases that we know are going to be happening in PERS and STIRS, and also by increasing the salaries for the step and column. So when we're looking at the projection, like we've already discussed, it's hard to predict the future and things are constantly changing. So at this moment in time, this is our best estimate as to what we see in the future. And as the expenses go up for salaries and benefits, we will have to potentially decrease maybe services to offset the increase in the salaries and the benefits. And we do that so that we can, maintain our reserves and make sure that the district is whole going into the future. Does anyone have any questions?
Just real quick, so in breakdown of ending fund balance, so the 1.259, that's all assigned for the coming year, yeah?
For which one?
It's line, I think it's 15.
Okay.
For 18-19. So all that's been assigned for next year?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I ask for approval of this adopted budget.
So moved.
Okay, second. Moved by Ms. Parker, seconded by Ms. Sims Moulton. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board members, it's been our tradition to take a budget break. So it's on my brain. A break between our action items and our discussion items. So about 5-minute break, does that still sound good? Okay, thank you. We are now under G1, first reading and discussion of board policy 0410, non-discrimination in district programs and activities. Dr. Wagner.
Good evening, Ms. Sims Moulton, Mr. Matsuoka, board. I'm bringing to you actually this is a standalone board policy, and then there will be some additional board policies to follow it. But this is, this policy 0410 is in response to the Safe Schools for Immigrant Students Bill AB 699. And the purpose of this update is to reflect this new law that adds immigration status to the categories of characteristics that are protected against discrimination. It also requires parent and guardian notification of their child's right to a free and public education regardless of immigration status or religious beliefs. And it mandates that districts adopt policies consistent with a model policy that was developed by the Attorney General, which includes a statement regarding equitable services. So the policy being brought to you reflects provisions of the Attorney General's model policy and new law, which is part of SB 31,
that prohibits the district from compiling or assisting in the compilation of a registry based on immigration status, religion, or other specified characteristics. So as you look at the policy, you can see that it adds to our existing policy, specifically calling out protected status, including immigration status, ethnicity, the status of pregnancy, and gender expression. So rather than read through it, I know that the board's had an opportunity to take a look. I will take questions at this time.
What question, Ms. Parker?
Hi, few things. One is, I noticed that they took out age, and I'm assuming that this is CSBA language, that we haven't
Yes.
made any local modifications.
None.
So they took out age, which kind of surprised me. I mean, maybe they figured that it's not, because they're all children, I don't know.
Yes.
And then age is for over 40, right?
Right.
And so is that why it's out?
That's what I would assume,
Okay.
that.
All right, so the language, I don't have any issues with the language or suggested changes, just with this new language coming into BP 0410, and then with the suggestion changes, revisions to the 5,000s that are about to come to us.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there is, or is there a plan to, in terms of parent notification, I mean, our parent notification forms are very, they're very,
Dense?
official, dense, and not easy to read. It looks like it's not important when a lot of the stuff in there is really important. I'm wondering, particularly for our students that may be coming in with concerns about immigration status, if there is any plan, or if it's already created, where there's a parental notification packet that just makes that in plain language in a way that addresses like frequently asked questions, like that kind of format, so that it's not just laid out the way our standard parent notifications are.
Absolutely. Actually, back in January of 2017, we put together our fact sheets and information. We had the town halls. We sent the information to our principals and other site administrators. It's our intention at the beginning of the school year to revisit that. It's been time to go back and revisit and send that back out. I am hesitant to do one-offs on parental notification on things because so many things rise to the level of importance that are required by law that I think it's more efficacious to be selective, to send it out in the parent notification as is required by law, but then also be mindful of bringing these things to parents' attention as we go along. Another thing about rights related specifically to immigrant students or students with various citizenship status, and that is, we have to almost do an ongoing campaign. We need to have visual reminders that are up, just have it be constant, and so that's an area that we can continue to work on.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, I had the same reaction, just that this, similar to the resolution that we did a year plus ago, this is actually a policy, and I think it's something to promote, whether it be a press release but I just think it's really important, and our community would be happy to read this, whether they have children in school or not. And so thankfully, we live in that kind of community. So I just encourage us to not to do what we can, and maybe even go beyond the parent community to the broader community.
Right, and I do work with a number of groups who, within the community who are sharing and assisting families in this area, and so that's another source of information for families. So we had an event at La Cumbre Junior High School last year. There have been events that the district was provided the space for, and we were able to share information at that time. We can continue to do those sorts of things.
Mr. Paredes-Roland?
Just one thing that kind of caught my eye. I'm really grateful that we've included all these categories, especially at gender expression, but that kind of just stuck in my head as I was reading through this policy. And so if you go through, there's a few mentions of like whoever's, the designee for the district. But what kind of struck me as odd is we're talking about gender identity, or gender expression, excuse me, or an identity, and our pronouns are stuck at he and she. And again, this is nitpicking. I'm sure there's 1,000 policies that we would need to go to, but I would kind of hope that we, going forward, realize that not everyone who's going to come in through this district is going to be gender binary. Just walking through my, Santa Barbara City College, that's the case. Not everyone is gender binary. Just kind of keep an eye to that, just kind of the sensitivity. I was kind of playing with the idea of just like, oh, let's just put they for everybody, but that doesn't work either, because that also kind of leaves folks out and feels, kind of will kind of trigger some folks. So I don't know. I mean, if we can, maybe this one, or maybe kind of going forward, just to like a little edit,
Well, I'd have to ask, what would the edit be? So he, she, they?
He, she, they.
I mean, that's a bigger, that's the question before the board is.
It's broader, or just, kind of brainstorm it, but just again, gender identity, gender expression, to be more inclusive. Even talking about the designee, because we don't know who the designee is going to be in a year, 5 years, 50 years, and I'd hate to be behind the 8 ball for too long, at least on that topic.
Exactly. For the time being, she is the designee, but I understand what you're saying.
All right.
Any other questions or comments on this? Are you going to be requesting to bring this back, or?
I'm requesting this go to consent on the July 24th board meeting.
Are we good with that, members? Okay, so.
Thank you.
Next, first reading and discussion of 6 board policies in the 5,000 series. Dr. Wagner.
Thank you. Bringing to you at this point 6 board policies in the 5,000 series that are related to the policy. We just look at making a number of updates. The first, do you want me to take them one by one? Shall we just go one by one? So the first is BP 5111, and it has to do with admissions of students. Generally, this policy is updated to reflect state law that prohibits the collection of Social Security numbers or the last 4 digits of the Social Security numbers of students or their parents and guardians unless otherwise required by law. The policy also reflects the new law, AB 699, which prohibits districts from inquiring into student citizenship or immigration status. And the California Attorney General's model policy is reflected in this admissions policy. It also goes to the importance of immediate enrollment of homeless, foster youth, students coming out of the juvenile justice system, et cetera. Really, it's about expediting enrollment so that students do not lose time in school. I will comment to the district that, to the board, that it is already the district's practice that we do these things. We are codifying our practices here, and our registrars and office managers have been trained in that regard already. We, after the November 2016 election, we did pretty extensive training of our registrars and office managers around this for enrollment purposes. So I'll open it up to questions.
Questions, board members? Not on this one.
All right.
Next.
Thank you. Moving on to board policy. Moving on to Board Policy 5125, student records. So, again, this policy is updated to reflect that model policy. It prohibits districts from collecting information regarding student citizenship and immigration. Once again, it requires district staff to receive training in the gathering and handling of sensitive student information. I already shared that we have provided that training, and we'll be revisiting that with staff in the fall. The policy also reflects state law limiting the collection of Social Security numbers, and it reflects the new law, SB 31, that prohibits districts from assisting in the compilation of a list, registry, or database based on students' national origin, ethnicity, or religion. So questions from the board?
Ms. Gibbs, did you have a question?
Yeah, this actually relates to this one and the previous one. Just a parent brought to my attention asking whether if our forms have an option for gender fluidity, and I meant to check before this meeting and I didn't, but I just flagged that it's sort of both with records and also with applications, if that's something that we do or could do in the future.
That's actually in Aries. Mr. Rouse, could you take the podium and explain the extensive process that we've gone through and the role that our district has played in changing student information systems around that?
To be sure. So with the anticipation of this legislation being passed, our student information system vendor, Aries, now allows for a gender code of non-binary. So you'll see there's male, female, and non-binary. The state is in the process of updating its system to also accommodate that code. So as soon as the state systems are updated, we will be uploading information in that form as well.
So for this, thank you. And I received as a parent the notification about the July 1st deadline to register. Will that be, it's not reflective yet? Is that accurate?
Well, it's, so and just clarify, the parents can register, the registration will open on or around July 1, and then parents will have until around the first day, or till the first day of school to register. So when you register, you don't specify a gender. The gender is just whatever was captured when the student first enrolls with the district.
Okay.
Beginning September 1st of this year, the state allows families to indicate to a school district or school system that a child has a non-binary gender.
Great.
And at that point, to have that updated by the school office, basically.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
And I can speak to, so we'll start providing information to those who work with the families to help them make those changes when they request them. We did something similar, we started several years ago with hiding legal names deep in the student information system and having the student's name that reflected there. So it's a similar sort of thing and a retraining for our folks. Okay.
Ms. Parker? So quiet down there.
We're all just waiting for you, Mrs. Melton. I'm just going to look this way.
Appreciate that.
My question was on page 2 of 4, student records from social media. And I was trying to get my head around what that was getting at. So the superintendent or designee may gather and maintain information from the social media of any district student, provided that the district first notifies students and parent guardians about the proposed program, offers an opportunity for public comment or at a regular scheduled board meeting, and gathers only information that directly pertains to school safety or student safety.
Yes.
What's that getting at, Dr. Wagner?
What that is getting at, and I thought that would be a question someone would have, is if we are going to use social media to do an in-depth investigation, to learn more about our students, if we're going to really do any work where we're diving deep into social media and looking at social media, then that's what that pertains to, for any reason.
That means that, for example, pupil services felt like it needed to have more information about something to do with safety,
Yes.
that you'd come up with a program, you'd present it at a board meeting and say, we're going to be looking at student district social media.
So
students-
here's an example. If we were wanting to know about student use of vaping, there's a topic, and we decided that we were going to start looking at, public access on Instagram, Snapchat, other things that we might have access to, then that would apply in that case.
Okay, but so to be clear, it would have to come to, if you're going to do it, you can't just do it. So in some ways, this is really safeguarding student.
It is. It's
Privacy.
protecting their rights, because if we're going to do any in-depth sort of investigation of social media or use it as a tool, we need to get your permission in order to do that, for collecting data.
Can I
Yes,
add one thing?
Absolutely.
There's this whole new business model that companies are starting on the internet, that they actually use AI to monitor social media accounts of students. So districts can apply for this or sign up for this service, and then they run reports, and will give you reports about trends they're seeing and possible threats and all of that.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
And that's, I do want to delineate, that is different than if we're doing a one-off investigation and looking into things and we use social media. And usually law enforcement does that for us. Okay. Any other questions?
Yep, I'm just into that. Yes, Mr. Paredes Arroyo. I just really messed that name up. I was doing good until I had to think about it. Okay, so you do have a comment, so go ahead.
Just really quickly, just on was it page 1, last paragraph, no information, yada, 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 except as required by state or federal law, or as required to administer a state or federally supported educational program. Kind of for me and also for public, anyone watching, do those situations come up fairly often, rarely? How concerned should parents and students be?
That,
It's page 1, so.
right. That does not come up regularly. And we do store student records after graduation, and so there might be an opportunity for us or a need for us to use a third-party vendor to do the scanning and storage of that information. But outside of that, no, not at this time.
Okay.
All right, I think we're good on that. Looking down the line, don't see any fingers up in the air. Okay.
All right, moving on to Board Policy 5131.2, also updated to reflect AB 699. This policy specifically requires districts to educate students about the negative impact of bullying based on actual or perceived immigration status or religious beliefs and customs. And so what it is requiring us to do is in our work to educate our students about the harmful impact of bullying and harassment, we are required to now specifically call out religion, immigration status, et cetera.
Any comments or questions? Okay. We're good to go. Thank you. Like that one.
Any questions?
No questions.
We're good?
We're
Okay.
good. We're ready.
Everyone's in approval of that? Okay.
Yes.
BP 5145.3, non-discrimination and harassment. This just had some minor revisions made, again, prohibiting discrimination that's based on immigration status. So any questions on that update?
Questions? No, we're good.
Okay. And moving on to parental notification. So in March 2018, there was CSBA update, and we have a specific Again, this specifically now has to go into our parental notification. As we spoke of earlier, it says the policy updated to reflect federal law applicable to districts participating in certain federal programs, which requires that parental notifications be presented in an understandable and uniform format, and to the extent practicable, in a language that parents and guardians can understand. In our case, we always provide parents' rights in both Spanish and English. The Spanish format is identical to the English format. So we are in adherence with this policy.
Just a question, are there
Yes.
other languages that we need to translate into?
The law said, not by statute, we're not required to do that because we don't have the requisite number of families requiring that.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this one? We're good to go on this one. Dr.
Okay.
Wagner?
And finally, we have Board Policy 5145.13, Response to Immigration Enforcement. And this policy is related to the district's response to requests by law enforcement for access to information, students, or school grounds for immigration enforcement purposes, and actions to be taken in the event that a student's family member is detained or deported. This policy also reflects the new law, Senate Bill 31, which prohibits districts from compiling or assisting federal government authorities with compiling a list, registry, or database based on students' national origin, ethnicity, or religion. This codifies the practices that this district adopted in January of 2017, and again, as we discussed earlier, have been our practices. We have not, in that year and a half, had any experiences with ICE coming onto our school campuses, but our principals and other site administrators have been informed of what they are to do if that happens, and that is to call the superintendent's office immediately.
Any comments? Ms. Parker?
So I'm not sure where a language that I would suggest responds, but this is the only place that I saw that teachers receive training regarding immigration issues. And so maybe it belongs here. But one of the things that came up, and Ms. Carey was present as well, when we were at the PD week for the district, and there was a talking in class presentation. And a student was sharing that a counselor had created a fabulous post-secondary plan for her. And she actually, she burst into tears as she was talking to us about it, because the counselor had not realized that she was undocumented, and the student realized in that moment that this was a fantastic plan that she would love to do, but she couldn't. And of course, the counselor can't ask these questions, and yet you need to be sensitive about it. And so I don't know if there's language, when we talk about receive training regarding immigration issues, that includes the social emotional impact and how to be sensitive. And I don't know if that's maybe, I would leave you to tweak the language in that sentence, but that it includes a component, not just about responding to an ICE officer visiting a school site or having access to a student, but is also a little bit broader than that. And how to deal with these challenging situations in a way that's sensitive to students. And I don't know where else to put it.
I'm sorry, where are you
I'm looking at
proposing?
page 1 of 2
School
at the very bottom.
administrators and other school staff.
Receive training regarding immigration issues, including information. So it could be including social emotional issues and information on responding to a request, something along those lines.
I see where you're saying that. How about just in addition?
Mm-hmm.
And call it out specifically?
Yeah. Okay. I'd leave you to tweak wording that makes sense for your needs. All right, do you want me to, can I go ahead and bring that back on consent as well, and you can pull it if there are any questions about it? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments on our last policy in this series? So, are we
All right.
asking, we're done, or are we asking all to bring the others as well?
I would
All
like,
6 of
I would
them?
like to ask that all 6 be brought on consent at the July 24th board meeting.
That agreeable? So be it. Okay, thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Dr. Wagner. Okay. Our last item, G3, at least under this section, discussion of new course approval. Ms. Carey.
Good evening again, Board. This is a new course approval request for a course that is new and is innovative. It has the title Literacy Intervention, but I want to connect some dots for you and have you appreciate that this represents the expansion of the effort that you are familiar with that's been existing in the elementary grade span around providing targeted reading instruction to students with identified reading disabilities into the secondary grade span. So this is an elective course that will be offered at Santa Barbara Junior High and at Santa Barbara High School in order to, again, provide identified students with this targeted reading intervention. So these are students with IEPs who will receive those services. So these are all the things that we do now as part of our automated workflow whenever we have a new course we're bringing forward. So there's a lot of specific information about the course in these 3 pages, but that's the overarching comment.
Ms. Capps?
Yeah, I was curious why, if it's on, for literacy, why it's an elective.
It's an elective because it's not a part of the core requirements for graduation or for college readiness. So there's a lot of academic electives that aren't, that are still electives, even though they might be about supporting a core subject area or about a core course.
Great.
Or a course in a core area. It's very common,
Of
yeah.
course, we're going to circle this back to music, right? And I guess that is a question. I mean, I think this is great, and I want to concentrate on what I see is a systematic rollout of the dyslexia plan, and I think that is terrific. It's great to see it expanding, starting to expand horizontally in elementary, and now this pilot rolling it up. And so, first of all, fundamentally, is it, when you say it's an elective, I mean, typically our students that need these types of services, it's not really an elective in the sense of it's, it goes to the state as an elective, but they're required to be in there. And so is it a question, I mean, and I guess I don't know, if you have junior high students and you say, look, you are clearly struggling and we think that this class would benefit you, do they have a choice, or are they required to go into this course?
So the term elective is probably, it's a bit misleading because it's not taking the place of art, music, woodshop, but these are students with IEPs, and so the team has built a master schedule where these kids will be pulled out in groups of 5s. So that's what the research says. We can now scale up. Instead of 3, it's 5s. But they're being taken out of, it's a lot of their special ed support classes. So we put the title elective because it was the closest thing we could find to find a placeholder so that when they're in that period, they're in a class. But I think it's probably misrepresenting that it's supplanting an elective opportunity.
It's about the coding for the state, as you said.
But does that mean they don't, to your question, they don't have an opportunity for an elective?
No, so it doesn't, well, go ahead.
I'd have to check with John Shetler, because John's been really building those master schedules. We're going to bring a report about the scaling up of the dyslexia program. We're targeting early August, just to wait for everybody to be back. So I'll make a note of making sure that we address that question.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that especially, if we're talking about Santa Barbara Junior High, they have one elective time, and so it really would have an impact. Whether they're in a different special ed class or in this class, it means that they don't have access to the traditional elective program. And so I kind of see that as a separate issue that can be talked about later, but I just, like Ms. Capps, thinks that it's important to note that. But I think it's great that we're moving forward, and I hope that it ends up being as successful. I know that there's going to be a lot to learn over the course of the next year with junior high and high school. And I guess my question mark for the high school, I assume that as this is sort of a support elective, that it's not anything that would fall in the A to G range. That's not anything that we could do for that. Yeah. Okay.
Additional comments, questions?
Other than the questions my colleagues raised, I am excited to see a literacy intervention. I know that our DSPS program at SBCC offers interventions like this for English and for math. So, and I've seen successes with it. So I've seen our students who are at the higher level, college level English classes really benefit from having something like this there. But again, it'd be nice to be able to see it, so it doesn't, student really wants to take an art, painting, music. It doesn't kind of kill that connection to their own education, where we're supplementing the need for any kind of literacy work. We're not inadvertently kind of killing their spirit for the rest of their education as well.
I appreciate that.
And I would just ask, how are we going to communicate this out to parents?
The students that have been identified to receive this support, they'll all be receiving direct communication, mostly around their IEP.
Additional comments or questions? Okay. No more questions at this point. Are you asking us to, are you going to be bringing this back to us, or?
I will, yeah. I'll just reinforce, and I can hopefully just confirm next time too, that I think that, as you heard, this capture size being up to 5 students, this is not maybe to be thought of as a course the way you would think of a course in a 6-period day. But we will clarify that point for you next time.
Okay.
I guess actually before you go, Ms. Carey, if I may, Ms. Sims-Moten, how many total students do you expect to be enrolled at Santa Barbara Junior High and Santa Barbara High next year?
25 per school.
Okay.
Because we're constrained by the 6-period day. The teacher can only teach 5 periods worth. So it's really 5 periods times 5 students per class period.
Okay.
Well, so 1.0 hire was made
Yeah.
for Santa Barbara Junior High and Santa Barbara High School to support this model.
Yeah. So I know that the public would say that statistically speaking, there's hundreds of kids at Santa Barbara High, for example, that might need this service. And so I don't know if you could address where the district is going.
Yeah, there's a continuum of student needs in the dyslexia space. I mean, if you get down to the hardest cases, is that like 3 to 4% of the population. The 20% number that's quoted in research, I mean, at the 20% level, that's, it's mild dyslexia, which can be remediated, with lighter touches. What we're starting to think about is how do we scale this so we can serve more students. It's a very human-intensive process. At Harding, we're going to take a look at how can we match up either a curriculum specialist or some kind of paraeducator to amplify the impact of the one teacher. Because otherwise, we're limited to 15 to 18 kids per school. And the need is huge. So know that phase 2 is like, how do we start to amplify the ability of the teacher to serve more kids? So now as we move into the secondary space, we need to test the primary model first. Okay, let's just see how we can serve 25 kids. And then I think there's the paraeducator level that we can leverage to start to serve more kids. So yes, there are thousands, but the needs are on a continuum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We're moving to H, which we have no items to return. So we're going to Move to I, coming events. Board members, any coming events, or other than some vacation, much needed? Yeah, yeah. Okay. And any future agenda items? Not at this point. So that leads us to K. Next meeting, Tuesday, July 24th, 2018, 6:30 here at the district office, and then following that by August 14th. And if it be the will
Hold
of
on,
the...
oh. I do want to appreciate Ms. Sims Button for taking over as board president today. Did a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting at 8:55? So moved. All right.